Hello everyone! In this lesson, we will finally learn how to load WordPress content with JavaScript into our page in real time. So for example, if a visitor opens up the search overlay and searches for biology, down here in this results area, we want to load in any posts or pages or programs or professors that have to do with biology. Now, believe it or not, the first step in learning how to do this has nothing to do with JavaScript in particular. Let me show you what I mean. So right now, for our first step, here's what I want you to do. Up in the address bar, at the very end of the root of our WordPress URL, add on a /wp-json, JSON, right? So just like you would normally say wp-admin to go to the dashboard, instead of that, we're saying wp-json/wp/v2/posts. And then let's press enter. Whoa. So the question is, what in the world are we looking at right here? Now this might look like pure and utter chaos, but believe me when I say that by learning and understanding what we are seeing here, we are going to be able to jump up to the next level in our WordPress developer careers. So what we are looking at right now is completely raw data for the 10 most recent blog posts on our website. And if we go up to the address bar and at the very end of the URL, if we change this from posts to pages and then press enter, well, we are now looking at completely raw data for the 10 most recent pages. But what does that really mean? Well, this text that describes the 10 most recent pages is structured in a very particular way. It's structured using the JSON format, hence why this URL begins with WP-JSON. JSON is an acronym that stands for JavaScript Object Notation, which is just a super popular format for structuring data. Now this code is not JavaScript in the sense that it's not going to actually do anything or execute any actions. It's only JavaScript in the sense that it's describing an array of objects. Now if we look at all of this at once, it looks like pure chaos, but if we break it down bit by bit, it's actually super simple. Notice that the first character is an opening square bracket. A square bracket is how you create an array. And remember that an array is just a collection of multiple values separated by commas. So in this case, it's an array of objects where each object is a WordPress page. So the square bracket starts the array, and then this curly bracket is how you begin an object in JavaScript. So for example, maybe this first chunk of code is the About Us page, and then this next chunk of code is the privacy policy page. In order for this to make more sense, I'm actually going to jump into my text editor, and you do not need to type out what I'm about to type out. This is just a quick demo or explanation. So we look at this huge chunk of code and it looks super intimidating. But really all that WordPress is doing is it's giving us an array, so square brackets, and an array can contain multiple values separated by commas, right? Something like this. Except instead of simple values for each item, it's an array of objects. Now in JavaScript, an object is just a pair of curly brackets like this. So really it's just an array separated by commas of objects. Now let me space this out onto different lines so it can really start to make sense. So let me place each object on its own line. And if each one of these objects is a WordPress post or page, we could imagine that maybe in this first object, it would have a property named ID, right? Because every post in WordPress has a numerical ID. And then in JavaScript, within an object, you can just add a comma to add another property. And every post or page in WordPress probably has a title. So maybe this is the About Us page. And every post has a date, right? So then this would have a date of some sort. Right, so this first object is the About Us page, and then maybe the second object has an ID of 4 and a title of privacy policy, and it has a different date. Right, you get the idea. The big picture, the big point is that this is nothing more than an array of objects, and each object is a post or page. Now, if you're anything like me, or just if you're a human being instead of a robot, this way of spacing out the data is a lot easier to read than this, where everything's just completely smushed together. And if we're going to try to work with this WordPress data, it would be nice if we could view it in a way that actually made a little bit of sense. Well, luckily there's this super popular and free tool named Postman. It doesn't cost a penny, so I encourage you to go download it right now. Go ahead and pause this lesson. As of this moment, the official URL is getpostman.com. That domain could change in the future, but if you just Google for Postman program, this should show up as the #1 result. Again, it doesn't cost even a penny, so go ahead and download it. Although I guess before you pause this lesson and download it, you might want to first see what it is and what it does. So if I go back to my WordPress JSON tab, up in the address bar, let me actually go back to the posts URL instead of the pages URL. Okay, so all of this data is smushed together and it's super hard to look at and understand at all. But what I can do up in the address bar is select this URL and copy it into my clipboard. And then I already have the Postman app installed on my computer. So if I jump into Postman, here's that app. In this main text field here, I can just paste in my clipboard. Make sure that it's set to a GET request, which it should be by default. And then you can either just press enter on your keyboard or hit the big blue send button. Cool, so now instead of the JSON being all smushed together and impossible to read, the Postman app separates it out, one property per line, and the human eye can actually start to see what's going on. So the first post has an ID of 65. It's got a slug of "We won an award." Here's the link or permalink. Here's the title. Here's the content. You get the idea. Now I want to say that you do not need to use Postman. It's just a nice optional tool to help you visualize the data that we're working with. Okay, now at this point the question becomes, how does this JSON data and these URLs that WordPress provides to us, how does this help us with our live search results? Right? If someone opens the overlay and searches for biology, how can we leverage these WordPress JSON URLs to give us what we want? Well, check this out. At the end of this URL, we can add on extra info to tell WordPress what we are looking for. So by default, this is going to give us the 10 most recent posts. But if I only want the 2 most recent posts, at the very end of the URL, I can add on a question mark and say per_page equals 2. And now there's only JSON for 2 posts, or I could set it to 1. Or if I was looking for a specific post and I knew the numerical ID number of the post, I could go to this URL. So wp-json wp-v2 posts, and then add a slash, and then just include the ID. So maybe 7, for example, and that will give me that one specific post. Okay, so the idea is that there's things we can add to the end of this URL to customize what WordPress sends back to us. Now back to the task at hand, we want to power a search. So what we are really interested in is this. Check this out. Let's get rid of the number and the slash. Okay, and right after posts, let's just add question mark, search equals, and then any word or phrase that you want to search for. So I know that I have a blog post named "We won an award," so if I search for award, it returns the blog post, and here we can see the title is "We won an award." Right now might actually be a good time to go create a few new test sample posts, just so we have something to search for. So in my admin dashboard, I'm going to create a new blog post. Maybe I will title this one, "Biology is Cool." Paste in some dummy text. Go ahead and save that. Okay, and then back in our JSON tab, if we just change the URL to search equals, and then instead of award, you could search for biology. And this is the JSON for that post that we just created. Here we can see the title is "Biology is Cool." Now at this point, the gears in our head are really starting to spin. because this search parameter will work perfectly with the live search results that we want to build. However, you might be thinking to yourself, what good does it do us to visit this URL in a browser like this? Right? The visitors of our website won't know to do this, and even if they did, they wouldn't know what to do with this data. Well, that's a fair point, but what if I told you that we can use JavaScript to programmatically send a request to this URL in the background in real time? And then we can use this data however we see fit in our code. So right now, let me show you how that works and how we can get started. So let's begin by jumping into our text editor. And within our JavaScript modules folder, let's jump into search.js. And let's scroll down to our getResults method. Remember, this is the method that will run after the 2000 millisecond gap in between keystrokes. As of this moment, all this method is doing is updating the results div to say, imagine real search results here. Now, this is not what we actually want to do, right? This was just a placeholder. So why don't we go ahead and delete that line of code. And within the getResults method, let's also delete this line that updates the isSpinnerVisible property. Okay, so at this point, our getResults method is completely empty. And at this point, the question becomes, how can we use JavaScript to send out a request to a URL, right? We want to visit this JSON-based WordPress URL. Well, check this out. jQuery makes this very, very easy. So in our method, let's just say $sign to begin using jQuery, and then period to look inside the jQuery object. And jQuery has a method named getJSON. Now within the parentheses, this method takes two arguments. The first argument is the URL that you want to send a request to, and the second argument is a function where you can say what you want to do after that URL responds. In our example, this JSON-based URL responds by sending back all of this data. So let me show you what we can do. Let's just fill in these two arguments. So the URL is simple enough. Let's just go back to our browser and let's just copy this full URL that returns this JSON. Let's copy the URL into our clipboard. And then for this first URL argument, let's get rid of that placeholder and add in quotations and then just paste in our clipboard. For the moment, we can go ahead and leave this hard-coded to search equals biology. We will learn how to actually search for what the user types in a bit later on. For now, let's focus on the function that we want to run after this URL responds with the JSON data. So instead of this placeholder X, you could type in the name of a method or function that you want to run, or we could just create an anonymous function in line right here. And that's actually what I'm going to do. So let's get rid of the X and say function, parentheses, curly brackets. And then just to stay organized in between the curly brackets, why don't we drop down to a new line? And now within the body of this function here, we want to be able to access all of the JSON data that this URL responds with. Now luckily, when this getJSON method fires the callback function, it's going to pass whatever data this URL responds with into the function. So within the parentheses for this function, we just want to be sure to include a parameter so that we're basically giving that data a name so we can reference it later on. Now the name here does not matter. We can make up whatever parameter name we want. So we could call it data or results, or I'm actually going to call it posts. All right, and now within the body of this function, we can use that name, posts, to access all of this JSON data. So just as a test, let's give ourselves a goal. Let's try to create an annoying alert pop-up message just as a test, but let's try to display the title of the WordPress post that this JSON code is describing. So remember that this is really just an array. Now in this case, there's only one object in the array, right? There's only that one blog post named biology is cool, but it's still an array nonetheless. So we can work with this just like any other array in JavaScript. So we gave it a name of posts, and then to look inside an array, remember it's square brackets. In this case, there's only one item in the array, so we want to access the first item. Arrays are 0-based, so if we want to access the first item instead of a 1, we use a 0. Okay, and then let's look inside that object for the title. Now, in situations like this, where I need to find out the name of a property, instead of looking at this squished together pure chaos, this is where I feel like the Postman app is really valuable. So I'm just going to copy this URL into my clipboard, and then in the Postman app, let me paste in that URL and send out a request. So this way I can see the JSON spaced out in a way that makes sense. So I can see that this object has a property named title, and that is really just an object itself that contains a property named rendered. So back in our code, we want to look inside that object for a property named title, and then we want to look inside that for a property named rendered. Okay, at this point, let's go ahead and save this and test it out. So back in our actual website tab, if I open up the search overlay and search for anything, perfect. We see this annoying alert pop-up message. Biology is cool, which is the name of that WordPress post. Okay, now let's take things one step further and actually make the search dynamic. What I mean by that is instead of hard coding this search parameter to always be biology, let's actually search for whatever the user types in here in the text field. So back in our code, at the end of that URL that we are sending a request to, let's delete the hard-coded biology. So it ends in search equals and then the quote ends. And then right after the quote, we can just add on whatever the visitor has typed in into the search field. So we know that we have a property named this.search field, and we can access whatever the visitor has typed into it by running the val method. So that way our URL is search equals whatever the user types in. Cool, so let's save this and give it a test. So if I search for award, perfect. We see a blog post with a title of "We won an award." But if I actually do search for biology, then the search results are different and we see biology is cool. Now take a moment to give yourself a pat on the back because you just created your first real-time JavaScript application. Now obviously we don't actually want to create these annoying pop-ups, right? Instead we want to display results down here in the results div area. And that's exactly what we're going to learn how to do in the next lesson. We will learn how to generate beautifully formatted HTML based on incoming JSON data. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's keep things rolling, and I will see you then.